How's it going, guys? I'm Jeff.
I'm Alyssa.
Welcome back to the Real Life Podcast. We're talking about faith, culture, and answer your questions.
Say that 5 times fast.
Right? Guys, this is big moment. If you're listening on audio, you don't know how big of a moment this is. But I just kind of put,
it's not that big.
Stole my own thunder. We rearranged the office studio a little bit to have like a little bit newer set for our podcast. And we're bringing the podcast back on video. So I haven't uploaded the podcast to our YouTube channel for like 4 or 5 months just because it was a little bit more work. We had some things going on, etc. But I feel like, you know what? This is the time to get back on it, get back on the horse, get back in the saddle, upload some videos. So one, if you're watching on YouTube, please let us know if you're watching there. Just the Real Life Podcast if you want to search that on YouTube and subscribe. But we're back. What do you guys think of the new set? Do you like it? It's a little bit homier than the blue backdrops. I will say, you do know now, watching on this set with the way we configured it, that we're barefoot. And I know some people aren't going to be vibing with that. Some people do not like feet. Even to the point where they don't even want to see a foot, even if it's a small zoomed out foot in the screen. So I'm just going to let you know, if that's you, I am sorry, but we record barefoot. That's just how it's going to be.
You know what's so funny? I don't even think about that. Whenever we take a picture outside or something, I'm always barefoot. Or if I do like an Insta story with clothes, I'm always barefoot. And I don't realize it at all until I see other people's. I'm like, oh, they're trying on different shoes. There's different shoes that go with different outfits.
Right.
I'm just
not
a shoe person.
Yeah, and I don't really care either. Like, I actually think the people.
But you like shoes.
Sure. The people that are weird about feet, though, that actually is a pet peeve of mine.
Well,
like,
but you're like on the extreme other side.
Like, no, I mean, I think, here's the thing. I don't think feet are gross. I think gross feet are gross.
No, I'm saying you like, your favorite thing is a foot massage. So you're the opposite where you don't care about stinky feet.
No, I do. That's where, okay, we're talking about two separate things right now. That's a whole different thing. Yeah. I care about stinky feet. I don't ever want to touch one. I don't ever want to see one. I don't ever want to have one. That's different. What I'm saying is there's people that just like a foot. It could be the perfect, most purest, most beautiful foot in the world. And they're like repulsed by that.
Really?
Yeah. That to me is like actually that is a pet peeve of mine where people have that kind of feeling about a foot. My thought is, yes, gross feet are gross. Feet are not gross. Does that make sense?
So then my question are those people, do you wear shoes in your house?
Yeah. If you're one of those people.
I want to know.
You first of all need to.
Because growing up, we were not allowed to wear shoes in our house.
Well, yeah, and then here, living in Hawaii, that's like a classic rule. Like, you don't live.
Leave it at your front door.
You want to know if you're in Hawaii, go to like a party of any sort, and if there's like 50 pairs of slippers and shoes out in the lanai or porch, then you know you're in Hawaii.
You know what's interesting though?
What?
I've never smelled. I mean, I think I can say never. I've never smelled stinky feet in Maui, but in Washington, when people would come over and take off their shoes,
yeah, let me tell you why. I have a philosophy. Here's why.
Tell us.
So
this
in
is
Washington,
also not where we were going to go with the podcast.
Washington, a primarily wet, colder climate, your feet are going to be bundled. They're going to be wrapped. They're going to be fermenting like a big old bottle of kombucha. Okay?
Gross.
Exactly. That is gross. And that's problematic. So that then, because when you release the covering, then yes, there will be fumes. There will be gases. But when you live in Hawaii,
is it because you're sweating? Is it because you can't breathe?
All of it.
In your shoes?
The moisture can't breathe. You're sweating. I feel like the feet get damp because of rain. Yeah. All that to say, but Hawaii is the opposite.
Climate?
Hawaii, you're in slippers, which by the way, that's what we in Hawaii call flip flops. Don't call them flip flops. They're called slippers.
Which is so cute because when our niece came to live with us, who's 5, for a little bit, we kept telling her, "Oh, go get your slippers. We're going outside."
And she thought we were talking about the big,
bringing
puffy,
her puffy, fuzzy slippers. And I kept being like, "Why is she wearing her slippers
like those
outside?"
kid pajama slippers. Yeah, that was hilarious.
We had to like throw them away. They were destroyed after.
Well, because you wore them as like normal shoes, which we were asking her to, but she thought, yeah. What I was saying with that, though, is Hawaii, like people in Hawaii, you know, our feet are constantly being aired out, you know, and kind of purified by the salt water, the salt air, the dry climate.
Even though they sweat because it's sweaty, it's hot.
Yeah, but they're never bundled. I think there's like a spiritual illustration there too.
It's all about the socks.
Yeah, there's a spiritual illustration there. If you want to keep your spiritual life clean, if you want to keep your spiritual life whole, you need to air it out.
How would you air it out though? What does that mean?
Constantly dipping it in spiritual salt water, constantly wearing spiritual slippers, constantly allowing it to spiritually breathe. There we go.
You need to play that out a little more.
I'm gonna let people fill in the gaps there. That was a strong sermon. Yes, Lord, and
Basically,
amen.
it's don't quench the spirit. Don't put it in a sock and a shoe.
Exactly. Don't quench the foot and don't quench the spirit.
There you go.
What are we going to
talk about today, babe?
Guys, we got lots to talk about.
We probably lost half the people.
Yeah, guys, stay with us. Stay with us. And if you are staying with us, then you heard me just say stay with us. So I don't think that's relevant. But anyways, we had a topic for today. No, honestly, though, I do feel like, so, we're over a month into quarantine now, shelter in place, month and a half, depending on where you're kind of at and what kind of part and stuff like that. But there's been a topic that I think this phrase or this philosophy or this topic that me and Alyssa have been coming back to of just like, I think one question we've asked this whole quarantine is, what is the Lord up to? What's the Lord doing? What's his purpose? What's his mission? What does he want from us? What does he want from the world? What does he, okay, hold on, guys. I got to go check on Cannon real quick. I'll be right back. He's calling us real quick. Okay, guys. Sorry about that disruption. Cannon just needed something real quick. Also, by the way, if you're watching on video, not all the stuff is coming in the mail. That's why we're holding the mics right here, which looks kind of weird. That won't be forever. So, yeah, stay tuned. We're going to get something here. Have the mics all Yeah, there you go. Look at Vanna White over here. Alyssa White over here. Okay.
Justin's super excited. He stained the surfboard.
Exactly. It's looking good.
These
frames, these vintage Hawaii posters,
a fiddle
leaf, lighting, chairs, rug, etc. Just phenomenal. Anyways,
he's done during quarantine.
Exactly. What have you done during quarantine? I think all of us have kind of picked something, Okay, so we're asking the big questions right now. I feel like of just like, what does God have for us? Where does he have us? What is he doing in the world, in our neighborhood, in our city, in our lives, in Christian community? A lot of different ways to answer that. But I do feel like a phrase has come to our hearts that's kind of, I think, been true for us, but I also feel like true for what we feel like is almost what we feel like God's doing in the world, that then is even kind of spurred us on to even jump even a little heavier into our mission with family teams and stuff like that. And I think this phrase that we keep coming, I don't know exactly what I've been saying, but I think the phrase we've been using is that I do feel like this is a time that God is calling all people's hearts to return home. And by the way, I know we have a lot of people that most of this will be family specific we'll talk about, but we have a lot of people that are single, college student, young professionals, dating, not married, etc. And I think this applies to everyone. I don't think having your heart come home just means, home to like kids and a spouse. I think it just means like centered in a home or in relationships in that sense. But yeah, I feel like God is calling us all home, calling us to have our heart return home. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. I think though, just to unpack it a little bit before I pass it is, before I unpack it, you just talk about it.
No, you go.
I think God is using this time to really have people's hearts return home. And what I mean by that is specifically, so if you are a family, I'm seeing across the board, while there's stress, like we're not going to minimize that. There's stress, there's job loss, there's crisis, there's enormous hits people are taking in the medical industry, etc. But, and I don't even know if I'd call it a silver lining because I don't love that phrase, but I do think in a parallel track, people's hearts are being called home and people's hearts are returning home. And what I mean by that is from an identity perspective, from a meaning perspective, from a purpose perspective. I was just even on a call with some people earlier, some guy friends in our integrated coaching group. And kind of our integrated mastermind, which if you don't know about integrated, you need to go look it up. I think it's on familyteams.com or familyteams.com/integrated. It's basically like this secret brotherhood where we get together twice a year in person and we basically stay in a house for 2 days. The next one's later this year. Hopefully that'll happen. But also it's just like when we're and we just talk faith, family, business. How do you integrate them? How do we sharpen each other? It's an awesome mastermind. But we have a monthly call too. And I think one of the guys on there was even talking about that same thing, how this is just so activating. He was talking about from an extracurricular standpoint of just like he's realizing with everything canceled how much extracurriculars just like you say yes to so many without even realizing it, Sure. And he's like, I'm just home. Like we're reading, we're just playing games. We're just like going for walks. And I just could hear in his voice that like, yeah, there's this return home to the, not even just the pure hours, but there's like, that does something then to a spirit of like your heart is home. I think a lot of times guys and girls, cause I think a lot of times we do sometimes talk about this for the husbands, but I think it's true of women, men, and again, people even without families. I think a lot of times our heart is elsewhere. Our heart is outside the home. Our heart is in our job. Our heart is, I don't know, in some cultural pursuit. Our heart's on the internet. I know it's a weird one, but I think it's true. When I think our heart should be at home. Now, our identity is in the Lord. First and foremost, at the center, our identity is in the Lord. We're his child. But I do think then in the physical world, there is then a kind of a concentric circle or priority type vision where God, we don't get our true definition and meaning from the home. But I do think it is like an anchoring point that we actually are meant to find our identity in. That's not like the spiritual center, if that makes sense. So, and a lot of us don't have it there. A lot of us, again, have it in work, in performance, in the internet, in other people's praise, in all these other things. When I think, no, I think
performance.
I think we're called, our heart's meant to be home. So I can expand more on that, but I want you to talk about that for a second, how we've been working through that.
Well, a few things that came to my mind when you were talking about that is Ronald Rolheiser. I feel like
how do you say his name?
To say that.
How do you say
Ronald Rolheiser.
There we go. Rohrheiser. Yeah.
Struggle. Rohrheiser.
He's got to have that. His whole life had to just been.
I thought it was Rolheiser.
I'm pretty. No. There's no.
It's ROL.
No, I don't think it was an L. Is there an L?
Yes.
You've read him more recently than I have. I thought it was a more Rohr. Maybe I'm.
You think of Richard.
Exactly.
Rohr.
I think I'm putting Richard Rohr and Rohrheiser together.
Mm-hmm. This is Ronald Rolheiser.
Hold on. Let me.
Rolheiser.
You're right. Yeah, Ronald Rolheiser. You're so right. But yeah, brilliant.
That is not said many times, people. So let's just take a moment.
It's not said many. Brilliant author, though. Yeah, we love him.
Brilliant author. In his book, what was the one I was reading?
Domestic Monastery, Holy Longing.
The Holy...
Something Fire, Sacred Fire. He's got a lot of books, but they're profound.
It's a more recent. It's not. It's the one after Holy Longing.
Sacred Fire or?
Sacred...
Domestic Monastery?
No, not that one. Guys, this is so eloquently said. Anyway...
Was it about fire? Because that one is Sacred Fire.
Or Holy Longing. Anyway.
Here, I'm gonna hold
Sacred Fire or Holy Longing. It's the one we have on Kindle.
We got to chase the rabbits. I'm gonna get this.
Okay, sorry guys. Sorry.
Holy Longing, Sacred Fire, Passion of the Cross.
No, it's the one we have on Kindle.
So Restless Heart.
Go to your
Forgotten
Kindle.
Among the Lilies. I love Forgotten Among the Lilies.
Go to your Kindle.
Okay.
Anyway, he talks about, and I haven't finished the whole book yet, and I'm probably gonna butcher it, but he talks about how, in our childhood, we're in a home, whether it's broken or not. And then
it's Sacred Fire or Domestic Monastery. Those are the only two books we have in our
Sacred
library.
Fire. It's Sacred Fire.
Yeah.
Have you read that one?
I think a long time ago, but yeah.
Okay, so hopefully you'll remember this part.
I don't think I can, but yeah, go.
Okay, well, okay. Anyway, rabbit hole. This is like what it's like being us. Okay. So anyway, in the book, he talks about just how, like, when we're growing up, we're in a home, and then once you hit once you hit adolescence, and then through like a certain age, and it's different age for every person, we are then looking for how to come back home. And it doesn't necessarily mean coming back to our parents' house or being a child, but it's like, how do we make a home for us? And so a lot of times that involves, like, where am I going to live? What am I going to do with my life? Will I get married? And like creating a home in this way. And so when I think of this phrase, returning home, I think a lot of us, maybe some of you are in the season where you're still looking for home. You maybe long to be married and you're not married yet. You don't know quite what job you want to take. You don't know where you'll live, or you're living somewhere, but you feel like a change is on the horizon, or you're in an interim period, whatever that means. But maybe you are home, maybe you are married and you're established and you have a job and you have a family, or you're single and you feel pretty like set for a little bit. And I think, well, I don't really have much beyond that, but I just think that's a good point. Like, we are looking for home. Like, there is this, I think the point that I'm trying to make is that there is this part of us where we long to be home. And it's either as a child we are in a home and we want a home similar to that, or we want a new healthy home. And then we look for a home. And ultimately, of course, I think we're created with that because we're created for home with Jesus, and that, this is not our home yet. But then how do we make a home here? And I think in this however many last years, I think so many books came out this fall, including yours, about hurry and the hustle culture that we're in. And I think we've somehow forsaken home in a sense, like kind of sacrificed it for the everything else.
Yeah.
The fame, wanting to be
yeah.
seen, wanting to be productive, getting our identity from that. And so I think the Lord, in a way, has just stripped us all of that and is wanting us to come back home. And if that's like a home and like, okay, how do we really become a family team, or just enjoying your family, or working on things in your marriage, or learning to be really content with being at home and being stationary and not being on the go all the time and learning to not hurry and have to go places. But I think even taking it a step further and saying like, well, do I really find my contentment, my satisfaction, my peace and security in Jesus? Or do I find it in being busy and the things that I can do, or the friends that I have, or anything that you may that we just don't have right now in quarantine? I feel like it's funny. I don't feel like we necessarily have more time right now, because in a sense I feel like we have more responsibilities at home because we don't have as much help and things. But in another sense, I feel like the Lord is saying like, come home to me, my children, like come and find your contentment with me. Let me be your safe place. Let me be your voice in your head, not all these other voices.
I got so much there, babe. That was fire. That was sacred.
I was learning. You were kind of quiet. I was like, am I
amazing.
Gonna fall off a cliff? Am I not making sense?
No, that was amazing. That was sacred fire. That was sacred fire right there. Oh, it's so true. Well, I think, I think
in that sense, it applies to anybody, no matter what season you're in.
Exactly. Well, I love how you said that. Well, and Rolheiser is really good. If you don't read him, guys, you should. I mean, not everyone will love him, just his style of writing, the density, etc. But I feel like when you really, some of his stuff just like touches you just deeply. Yes. Yeah, more than any other author really can. It's just so prophetic and strong when it's good. But he has another book, Holy Longing, where he talks a lot about too, from different angles, like that one, of how kind of these like these long life journeys of what we were created for, how we were kind of born into, and kind of returning home, like you said. Another metaphor he uses in Holy Longing is kind of through our sexuality, and he even uses that term way more broadly than just like sex, how we think about it, but like sexuality as actually a part of who we are in other aspects of relationships and platonic and intimacy, etc. But he uses the word sex. Sext actually comes from the Latin word secare, which literally means to cut off. And so he kind of makes this argument in that book that we're all born sexed, which is a weird way to put it, but what he basically is saying, we're all born cut off. We're all born. He's like, he even kind of makes this claim that like that's the reason why the first thing you do as an image bearer on earth is cry. Like you're like cut off, wanting connection. You're cut off, wanting to be made whole again, and that's kind of like, in the first instance, that's with your mom, And so he just says that like, we're all kind of cut off. And the rest of life is basically trying to answer that problem, and Genesis 3 is that problem, our own sin is that problem, etc. So I think that's just a profound way to look at it. But I think this is a time for us to return home. Like you said, and I think that's so powerful. And I think too, you have to ask yourself, what is home? And I think home aspirationally, because here's the truth. When we say return home, or we say return to what home represents, some of us actually say that's not what home represents. That's home is terrible. Home was abuse. Sure. Home was traumatic. Home was whatever.
Or even now it's like.
Or it is now. Stressful,
like,
difficult.
We're fighting all the time.
We talked about this on a 5-Minute Fatherhood for Family Teams, but like China's, 3 to 4 months ahead of us, 2 to 3 months ahead of us on like the Corona crisis trajectory. And so they're already kind of coming out of it at some level, even though this will be a multi-year thing, depending on how you're talking about it. But on the spike, they're coming out of it, and they're already seeing strong data, and researchers are seeing that divorce rates are just skyrocketing.
Really?
Yeah, divorce rates. And the joke in the beginning was the opposite, right? I remember a lot of pastors and stuff were even kind of joking of like, oh, we all got to stay at home. Like, we'll have more sex and stuff like babies, that, babies. And there'll be, that line of like, we'll have babies. I wonder how many babies will be born 9 months from now, blah, blah. China's showing the opposite. It's actually it's almost like we're like because home is such a place of vulnerability too. Home is where you're so
busy, you can push things under the rugs in your marriage a lot.
Yeah, like home is a place where you can't hide. You shouldn't need to hide there.
Yeah,
that's the blessing of home. But home is also a place where you can't hide.
Yeah.
And I think that, and just like the friction of like, there's a lot of marriages that are just getting by and surviving because they actually only spend 2 hours a day with each other. And now they're spending 12 hours a day with each other, and it's just ripping them apart.
Sure.
Right. And that's like actually a pattern that was emerging out of China. I think it'll for sure emerge in the West, because I even think our view of marriage and some of these things are even a little bit different. And yeah, it's a time to return home, and we're not trying to make that idealistic, is what I'm trying to say. It is hard, whether that is past hardship, whether that is current hardship. But what I would say is that is the point of returning home. That there has to be the death before resurrection. There has to be the cross before new life, and that there's an aspirational ideal of returning home that isn't necessarily true in how we feel, but God wants to bring us to that new future, you know? Mm-hmm. So I think, I just think that's something. First, we have to start there. Then I think what do we mean by the good part of this? Like, I think there is a good part of it. I think aspirationally, again, when someone says home, the good that represents is home at its best is the ultimate place of belonging.
Yeah.
You belong at home. You feel seen, you feel heard, you feel known, you feel like you have a seat at the table, you feel like a safe place, you feel like you can let down the guard, you can take off the shoes metaphorically and walk in the door comfortably, physically, but also metaphorically at home. You can't do that at work, you can't do that at the YMCA, you can't do that at your gym, you can't do that wherever as much. Like, home is the anchoring place of, like, you are truly known and truly loved there, aspirationally, but hopefully it should also be true at some level. So that's what I think God's calling us back to right now, of like calling us back to that, because it's the center defining physical space, right? And again, even if you have roommates, even if you live with your parents, if you're not married, I still think there's this ordinariness about the place that you go to bed and wake up every single day that should anchor you more than it anchors most people in their identity and in their meaning and in their purpose. Mm-hmm. And the ordinariness is the specialness. Mm-hmm. Like that our hearts have gone other places to the flashiness. Our hearts have kind of like, marital love. Like, marital love is a good metaphor, right? Where, like, a lot of us dream about the love that 19-year-olds have when it's like feels really good and you're just like fall in love with someone and head over heels and The Notebook and blah, blah, blah. But the actual powerful love that actually like changes the world is the love that 80-year-olds have. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? That like have loved each other for 60 years and, help put on each other's diapers, stuff like that. And seriously though, I wrote about that. I don't know if all my books are starting to bleed together. I don't remember what stories I wrote in what books. that kind of sounded book pretentious or whatever. But I mean, there was one story, if you've read it, remind me. Maybe it's not what you think. I don't know. Where I talk about the seminary president and his wife got Alzheimer's and how just his love for her was the biggest testament of Christ, like in his whole life, of how he served and loved her more than like the professional ministry he was in. That love is more powerful than probably the love they felt when they were like dating, 60 years before that or whatever. So all that to say, I think there's something, that metaphor of marital love is actually, I think also too, why we don't want our hearts to return home, because the home is the ordinary, hard fought, hard won love, when the workplace and other places is the flashier dating puppy love.
Well, sure. Does that make sense? Home is ordinary, and ordinary is hard. Yeah. Ordinary is really sweet once you get there, but I love what you said about there's a death in order to get to the resurrection. And so I think that's why, obviously this pandemic is really heavy and there's a lot of hard things about it, but I also think on just the like everybody every day having that struggle, I think part of it is because there's a death, and obviously there's a loss of like, oh, I miss being with friends and community and or there's jobs or whatever, but there's also something inside of our souls that needs to die in order to be resurrected, to truly come back home in a sense, whether that is what you're saying, like, and I think it's easy when you go to work. I know we talked a lot about this with men, you can see your fruit right away. You can accomplish something, check off your to-do list. You can see you do A, B, and C and D comes out, or like you succeed in something and you get a promotion or whatever, all these things. And at home, it's not like that. It's like day in, day out, sowing seeds, being faithful, having the conversations, laying down your life, serving, cooking another meal, cleaning, having another heart-to-heart with your child, serving your husband, cleaning up their boxers, like all these things. And so it can feel mundane, and we don't love mundane. Yeah. But it's in the mundane where I believe we become holy. Mm-hmm. We learn to serve like Christ. We learn to rely on him. This month's hymn for our family is Jesus Paid It All. And I've been clinging to the first part this week about No, I'm not going to. We just started this week, so I don't know all the words, but it's basically like, I hear the Savior say, Thy strength indeed is small.
Indeed is small.
Child of weakness, watch and pray. Find in me thine all in all. I think that's so true. Like we find
Jesus paid it all. How am I on tune or whatever you call it for singers?
We find that we're weak.
Him. Yeah, go ahead. I was trying to serenade you.
This is my life, guys.
Trying to serenade you. I thought you were going to be
blessed. Every time I try to produce a nugget.
I thought you were going to be blessed by that. Okay, go ahead. You're producing nugs. Drop some more nugs.
Well, I think I lost my train of thought. Anyway,
you were saying the hymn and how it actually the mundaneness and
we are weak, and it's hard to choose to love and to serve, but through Christ and His power we can, and He is making us holy through this returning home and being faithful and working on marriages and serving our kids and being intentional and just kind of like sifting through all the noise to really get down to the basics.
Yeah. I actually have so much more to say, but I think I'm going to make a decision here. I think we're going to pause and come back next week for part 2. Even though me and you are going to continue recording 5 seconds after I press stop. But I just feel like for part 2, because I really try to honor you guys' time if you're watching on YouTube or listening on audio. We really try to keep these episodes 25, 30 minutes. I feel like that's just about the right space and time for you guys. You guys have told us that. And I have a lot more to say, and I don't want to try to feel like I have to fit it in, and I'm sure you do too, in 5 more minutes or whatever. So I think we'll just come back for part 2. So let's do this, guys. If this resonated, I'll hopefully try to remember to post some on Instagram or something, and I'd love to get the conversation started on like that God is calling us home. God is calling us home, and I love how Alyssa ended that the mundaneness is where holiness is found and where we're formed. You're dropping nugs on nugs.
And I think that was the message of fall, and everybody knew it. But it's hard to choose that.
Everybody knew it. Now it's the time to prove it. But right, though?
So I feel like now it's like, okay, now we're going to provide opportunity for everyone to really finish it out for me, babe.
Exactly. No, exactly. I agree.
I thought you were going to finish my sentence.
Oh, no, sorry. I wasn't. That's marriage unlock cheat code 10 year when you can like finish each other's sentences. We're not there yet.
Yeah, we're not there yet.
Just joking.
Jeff sometimes will kick me under the table, but it hurts really bad.
Do you guys do that in marriage too, where like you're with someone and they're saying like, because I wouldn't do this if it was just me and her. I would just say like, hey, maybe don't say that or something. But when
I'm always the one to get kicked.
Because I feel like
I want to know who in your marriage is the one to get kicked.
Who gets nudged under. Make it sound a little softer. Who gets nudged under the table? Well, but here's the thing. Well, it is a nudge, but Alyssa doesn't pay attention, so sometimes it has to turn a little harder. And then she goes, and then Alyssa's oblivious to kind of, here's a better question. Most marriages have one person who is completely hyper aware of their surroundings and the conversation and maybe how it's feeling or what it's looking like to other people. And one person is not that. So Alyssa's the person that if I'm trying to communicate without communicating, meaning with my eyes, with my eyebrows, with my looks, with all these things of like, stop saying that, don't go there, don't do that. That's, you don't know, maybe this person is, a trigger word for them or whatever, any scenario. I'll try to give those signals and Alyssa won't get them. So then I'll have to go physical, like nudge, elbow, kick her under the table. And then she goes, ouch, why are you kicking me? Why are you kicking? And I'm like, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. And so, so I feel like there's never two people in marriage that are the same. There's usually, I don't know, any marriages where two people are completely oblivious or one where they're both kind of aware and sensitive and good at that. It's like one or the other. So let us know if that's you. And that's a great signing off point. So we love you guys. We'll see you next week.